Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the USS Vengeance as it moved through the dark space near the outer edge of Zephyrian territory. The patrol had been quiet for 3 weeks now, and Jake was getting tired of staring at empty star charts. His crew was getting restless too, and he could hear them talking quietly among themselves during their shifts. The Zephyrian Empire controlled 40 star systems, and Jake had been patrolling these borders for 5 years without seeing anything more exciting than a few cargo ships and mining vessels. Lieutenant Amy Foster turned from her tactical station, with a confused look on her face. Her instruments were showing something strange, and she had never seen readings like these before. The sensors were picking up an object that seemed to appear and disappear from their screens every few seconds. Amy had been working with military sensors for 8 years, and she knew when something was wrong with the equipment, but this felt different somehow. Jake walked over to Amy's station and looked at the display screen. The object was showing up as a ship, but the computer could not identify what type it was. The size readings kept changing, and the energy signatures were unlike anything in their database. Jake had seen ships from dozens of different species during his time in the Imperial fleet, but this one was completely unknown to him. Commander Pete Williams joined them at the tactical station and studied the readings carefully. Pete had 20 years of experience in space combat, and he had never seen a ship move like this one. The vessel seemed to bend space around itself as it moved, and the laws of physics did not seem to apply to it. Pete suggested they might be looking at some kind of new experimental technology, but even that explanation did not make sense. The unknown ship was roughly the same size as their destroyer, but it moved with the speed and grace of a small fighter craft. Jake ordered Amy to try scanning it with their most powerful sensors, but every time they focused on the ship, their computers would crash and restart. The ship seemed to know when it was being scanned and would disappear from their sensors just as they were getting a clear reading. Amy reported that the hull composition was reading as impossible materials that should not exist according to their scientific understanding. The metal appeared to be both solid and liquid at the same time, and the energy readings suggested it was powered by something far beyond nuclear fusion or antimatter. Jake had studied xenotechnology at the Imperial Academy, and he knew that no known species possessed technology this advanced. The mysterious vessel performed maneuvers that violated everything Jake knew about space travel. It could stop instantly, from full speed without any deceleration period, and it could change direction at angles that should have torn any normal ship apart. The ship seemed to exist in multiple locations at once, and Jake wondered if they were looking at some kind of holographic projection rather than a real vessel. Pete suggested they try to make contact with the unknown ship, but their communication systems could not lock onto its position long enough to send a message. The ship appeared to be studying them just as carefully as they were studying it, and Jake felt uncomfortable being watched by something so obviously superior to their own technology. After 30 minutes of observation, the mysterious vessel simply vanished completely and did not reappear on their sensors. Jake immediately ordered Amy to record everything they had observed and prepare a detailed report for Imperial Command. The data they had collected would be invaluable to the military scientists who studied alien technology, and Jake knew this sighting would cause excitement throughout the Imperial fleet. He had his communications officer send an encrypted message to Admiral Helen Burke at Imperial Command on Zephyr Prime describing what they had witnessed. The crew of the Vengeance spent the next several hours discussing what they had seen and trying to make sense of the encounter. Chief Engineer Bobby Chen suggested the ship might have been using some form of dimensional travel technology that allowed it to move between different layers of space. Medical officer Dr. Lisa Park wondered if they had encountered a ship from the future that had somehow traveled back in time. Jake knew that their report would reach the highest levels of Imperial command within hours, and he expected they would be ordered to remain in the area and watch for the ship's return. The Zephyrian Empire had built its power through superior military technology, and the appearance of a ship that was clearly more advanced than anything they possessed would be seen as a potential threat to Imperial security. What Jake and his crew did not know was that their brief encounter with the mysterious vessel would mark the beginning of the end for the mighty Zephyrian Empire. The ship they had observed was just the first sign that a new power had arrived in their region of space, and this new power possessed technology that made the Empire's greatest achievements look primitive by comparison. Admiral Helen Burke received Jake's report at her office on Zephyr Prime and read it 3 times before believing what she was seeing. In her 50 years of military service, she had encountered every known species in the galaxy and their various technologies, but nothing in Jake's report matched anything in the Imperial database. The ship's capabilities were so far beyond current understanding that Helen wondered if her patrol captain had suffered some kind of equipment malfunction or crew hallucination. Helen had risen through the ranks of the Imperial fleet by being careful and thorough in her analysis of potential threats. She immediately ordered 3 more patrol ships to join the Vengeance in the area where the unknown vessel had been sighted. If there was a new species operating in Imperial space, she wanted to know everything about them before they became a problem for the Empire. The Empire had maintained peace through strength for 3 centuries, and Helen was not about to let some unknown aliens threaten that stability now. Dr. Carl Jensen arrived at Zephyr Prime's military research facility 6 hours after Admiral Burke's emergency summons reached him at the university where he taught xenotechnology. Carl had spent 15 years studying alien technology and had written 3 books about the various species and their technological capabilities, but nothing in Captain Morrison's report matched anything he had ever encountered before. Agent Lisa Stone from Imperial Intelligence was already waiting in the briefing room when Carl arrived. Lisa had a reputation for being thorough and ruthless in her investigations, and her presence told Carl that the military was taking this sighting very seriously. Captain Roy Miller entered the room a few minutes later, still wearing his flight suit, after rushing from his ship, the heavy cruiser Dominion. Admiral Burke showed them the sensor recordings from the USS Vengeance, and Carl watched in amazement as the unknown ship performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. The vessel seemed to phase in and out of existence, while moving at speeds that would have torn apart any normal spacecraft. Carl had studied the physics of space travel extensively, and what he was seeing violated several fundamental laws of nature. Lisa Stone reported that her intelligence networks had been searching their databases for any mention of similar ships or technologies, but had found nothing. The Imperial Intelligence Service had files on every known species in the galaxy and their military capabilities, but this mysterious vessel matched none of their records. Lisa suspected they were dealing with a completely unknown civilization that had somehow remained hidden until now. Captain Miller was assigned to take his ship to the coordinates where the unknown vessel had been spotted and conduct a thorough investigation of the area. Carl and Lisa would accompany him along with a team of the Empire's best scientists and intelligence analysts. Admiral Burke wanted answers, and she wanted them quickly before this potential threat could become a real problem for Imperial security. The Dominion reached the patrol area 12 hours later and immediately began scanning for any traces the mysterious ship might have left behind. Carl's scientific equipment detected residual energy patterns that were unlike anything in their databases, and the readings suggested the unknown ship had been in the area much longer than Captain Morrison had realized. The energy signatures indicated the vessel had been observing Zephyrian military installations for weeks, or possibly months. Lisa Stone's investigation revealed disturbing evidence that similar sightings had occurred across multiple star systems over the past 6 months. Patrol ships and civilian vessels had reported brief encounters with unidentified craft that matched the description of the ship seen by the Vengeance. The pattern suggested a coordinated reconnaissance operation by an unknown species that was systematically gathering intelligence on Imperial military and economic targets. Carl's analysis of the trace elements left behind in space showed materials that did not exist on the periodic table known to Imperial science. The unknown metals exhibited properties that seemed to change depending on the scanning method used, and some samples appeared to exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously. Carl had studied exotic materials for his entire career, but these substances were completely beyond his understanding. Captain Miller's crew detected energy readings that suggested the mysterious ship was powered by technology far beyond anything the Empire possessed. The power output readings were equivalent to a small star, and the energy was being contained and controlled in ways that Imperial engineers could not comprehend. Miller had commanded warships for 20 years, and he knew that any civilization capable of building such vessels would be extremely dangerous if they proved hostile. The investigation team spent 3 days analyzing every trace of evidence they could find, and their conclusions were troubling. The unknown ship had clearly been studying Imperial military capabilities and had somehow remained undetected while doing so. Their stealth technology was so advanced that it had fooled the Empire's best sensors and detection systems. Carl estimated that the aliens' technology was at least 500 years ahead of anything the Empire currently possessed. General Tony Parker arrived from Imperial Military Intelligence Headquarters to review the team's findings, and his expression grew more serious as he read their report. Tony had spent his career preparing for threats to Imperial security, but he had never encountered anything like this before. The unknown species possessed technology that could make them virtually unstoppable if they decided to attack Imperial territory. Lisa Stone's analysis of the ship's movement patterns revealed that it had visited 17 different star systems over the past 6 months and had focused its attention on the Empire's most heavily fortified military installations. The aliens seemed to know exactly where to look for classified information, and their reconnaissance had been far more thorough than any previous intelligence operation against the Empire. Carl's scientific team discovered that the unknown ship had somehow tapped into Imperial communication networks without triggering any security alarms. The aliens had been monitoring military communications and had access to classified information about troop movements and strategic planning. Carl realized that these unknown beings probably knew more about Imperial military capabilities than most Imperial officers did. Captain Miller reported that his tactical analysis suggested the unknown ship could easily defeat any Imperial vessel in single combat and might be capable of taking on entire fleets. The alien technology gave them overwhelming advantages in speed, maneuverability, stealth, and firepower. Miller recommended that Admiral Burke begin preparing defensive strategies immediately rather than waiting for more information about alien intentions. The investigation team returned to Zephyr Prime with a report that shocked Imperial Command and led to emergency meetings at the highest levels of government. Emperor Valix the Conqueror was briefed on the findings, and his reaction was immediate. Anger at the thought that some unknown species dared to spy on his empire. The Emperor ordered Admiral Burke to begin mobilizing the Grand Fleet for possible military action against these mysterious aliens. General Parker established a special task force to monitor all Imperial space for additional sightings of unknown vessels and to develop countermeasures against their advanced technology. The Empire's best scientists and military strategists were assigned to study the alien capabilities and find weaknesses that could be exploited in case of warfare. Carl Jensen returned to his laboratory with samples of the unknown materials and began conducting experiments to understand their properties. His preliminary tests suggested that the aliens had mastered manipulation of matter at the quantum level and could create substances with impossible characteristics. Carl knew that understanding this technology would be crucial if the Empire hoped to defend itself against these superior beings. Agent Stone expanded her intelligence operations to search for any historical records of contact with advanced civilizations that might match the capabilities they had observed. Her teams scoured ancient archives and classified documents looking for clues about who these aliens might be and where they had come from. The Empire that had ruled 40 star systems for 3 centuries suddenly found itself facing the possibility that it was not the most powerful force in the galaxy. 3 days after Captain Morrison's encounter with the unknown ship, every communication array across the 40 star systems of the Zephyrian Empire received an identical transmission at exactly the same moment. The message bypassed all security protocols and appeared simultaneously on military networks, civilian broadcasts, and even personal communication devices throughout Imperial space. Communications Officer Nancy Evans was monitoring the main Imperial communication hub on Zephyr Prime when her screen suddenly displayed an image of a human male wearing a simple dark uniform with no visible rank insignia. The man appeared to be in his 40s with short brown hair and calm blue eyes that seemed to look directly at whoever was watching. Nancy had never seen a human before, but something about this being's appearance suggested confidence and authority. The man spoke in perfect Zephyrian language with no accent or difficulty with the complex grammar that most alien species found impossible to master. His voice was steady and controlled as he identified himself simply as Commander Dan Clark and stated that he represented something called humanity. Nancy quickly activated the recording systems and sent priority alerts to Admiral Burke and Imperial Command as the message continued. Commander Clark explained that his people had been observing the Zephyrian Empire for an extended period and had become concerned about Imperial expansion into regions of space that humanity considered important to their interests. He mentioned specific star systems and colony worlds that the Empire had recently conquered or was planning to attack, including several locations that were supposed to be classified military secrets. The human commander described Imperial military operations with precise details that should have been impossible for any outsider to obtain. He knew troop strengths, fleet positions, supply routes, and strategic plans that were known only to the highest levels of Imperial command. Nancy realized that this Commander Clark was revealing information that proved his people had completely infiltrated Imperial security systems. Admiral Burke rushed to the communication center as Commander Clark's message continued with a list of demands that sent shockwaves through everyone listening. The humans wanted the Empire to withdraw all military forces from something called the Terran Neutral Zone within 72 hours and provide compensation to civilian populations that had been harmed during Imperial expansion operations. The human commander's tone remained calm and reasonable as he delivered ultimatums that would normally require years of diplomatic negotiation to even discuss. He spoke as if he expected full compliance with his demands and made it clear that failure to cooperate would result in consequences that the Empire would find unpleasant. Nancy noted that despite the serious nature of his message, Commander Clark never raised his voice or showed any signs of anger or aggression. Emperor Valix the Conqueror was awakened in his palace and rushed to the Imperial Command Center as reports poured in from across the Empire confirming that the message had been received simultaneously on every inhabited world. The Emperor's fury was immediate and intense as he listened to recordings of the humans' demands and threats against his empire. No species had ever dared to make such demands of the Zephyrian Empire, and Valex ordered immediate military preparations for war. Intelligence officer Nancy Evans began analyzing the transmission's technical aspects and made a disturbing discovery. The message had not been broadcast from outside Imperial space, but had somehow originated from within the Empire's own communication networks. The humans had managed to access and control Imperial systems from the inside without triggering any security alarms or detection protocols. General Parker assembled his best analysts to study every aspect of the human message, and their findings were deeply troubling. The transmission showed that these mysterious humans had been monitoring Imperial activities for months or possibly years without being detected. Their intelligence-gathering capabilities were far superior to anything the Empire possessed, and they knew details about Imperial operations that even high-ranking officers were not aware of. Dr. Carl Jensen was called in to analyze the technical aspects of how the humans had managed to infiltrate Imperial communication systems so completely. His investigation revealed that the aliens had somehow inserted their message directly into the quantum core of the Imperial communication network without leaving any trace of how they had gained access. Carl's expertise in alien technology told him that such capabilities required scientific knowledge far beyond current Imperial understanding. Captain Roy Miller reported that his ship, the Dominion, had detected no unusual activity in space during the time the message was transmitted, which meant the humans had probably sent it from a location deep within Imperial territory. The implications were terrifying because it meant these mysterious beings could operate anywhere within the Empire without being detected by even the most advanced military sensors. The human commander had provided specific coordinates where Imperial forces could meet with human representatives for negotiations, but Admiral Burke was suspicious that this might be a trap designed to destroy Imperial ships. The coordinates were in empty space far from any inhabited systems, which seemed like an ideal location for an ambush by hostile aliens with superior technology. Agent Lisa Stone's intelligence networks went into overdrive trying to gather any additional information about these humans and their capabilities, but their searches turned up nothing. The aliens seemed to have appeared from nowhere with technology and knowledge that made them virtually invisible to Imperial intelligence operations. Lisa realized that her people were dealing with a species that was far more advanced than anything they had encountered before. Emperor Valex called an emergency session of the Imperial Council and announced his decision to respond to the human ultimatum with military force. The Emperor declared that the Zephyrian Empire would never bow to threats from unknown aliens, regardless of their technological advantages. He ordered Admiral Burke to assemble the largest fleet in Imperial history and prepare for immediate deployment to the coordinates provided by the humans. Admiral Burke began mobilizing every available warship in the Imperial Navy, including the massive dreadnought Eternal Glory, which had never been defeated in combat. The Grand Fleet would consist of over 2,000 vessels with enough firepower to destroy entire planets if necessary. Burke was confident that overwhelming numbers would compensate for any technological advantages the humans might possess. The 72-hour deadline given by Commander Clark created a sense of urgency throughout the Empire as military commanders rushed to prepare their forces for what many expected would be the largest space battle in Imperial history. Scientists worked frantically to develop countermeasures against the unknown human technology, while intelligence officers tried to predict what kind of forces they would face. Nancy Evans continued monitoring communication channels, hoping to intercept additional messages from the humans, but detected nothing after the initial transmission. The aliens had delivered their ultimatum and then disappeared back into the shadows, where they had been hiding while studying the Empire. The silence was somehow more disturbing than threats would have been, because it suggested the humans were completely confident in their abilities. As the deadline approached, Imperial forces moved into position at the coordinates specified by Commander Clark, while scientists and intelligence officers worked desperately to understand what they would be facing. The empire that had dominated 40 star systems for 3 centuries was about to encounter a species that would challenge everything they believed about their own superiority and place in the galaxy. Admiral Helen Burke stood on the bridge of her flagship, the massive dreadnought Eternal Glory, as the largest military force in Zephyrian history assembled around her. Over 2,000 warships filled the space around the coordinates provided by the human commander, including every class of vessel from small fighters to planet-killing battleships. The Grand Fleet represented the accumulated military might of 40 star systems and 3 centuries of Imperial expansion. Captain Kevin Hayes commanded the destroyer Guardian and watched through his view screen as more ships continued to arrive from across the Empire. Kevin had fought in dozens of battles during his 20-year career, but he had never seen a fleet this large assembled for a single operation. The combined firepower of the assembled vessels could reduce entire planets to dust, and Admiral Burke was confident that no alien species could stand against such overwhelming force. Engineer Beth Martinez worked at her station aboard the cruiser Valiant and monitored the energy readings from the massive fleet surrounding her ship. The power output from 2,000 Imperial warships created interference patterns that made her instruments difficult to read, but Beth was experienced enough to maintain accurate readings despite the electromagnetic chaos. She wondered what kind of enemy could possibly require such an enormous military response. The 72-hour deadline given by Commander Clark had expired 6 hours ago, and Admiral Burke was growing impatient, waiting for the humans to appear. Intelligence reports suggested that the mysterious aliens operated only a small number of highly advanced ships, which meant the Grand Fleet should have an overwhelming numerical advantage in any battle. Burke had positioned her forces in a standard combat formation that would allow maximum firepower concentration against any target. Suddenly, a single ship appeared in the center of the Imperial formation, exactly where the human commander had said his people would be waiting. The vessel was identical to the one spotted by Captain Morrison weeks earlier. Sleek, unmarked, and radiating energy signatures that made Imperial sensors struggle to maintain locks. The human ship was roughly the same size as an Imperial destroyer, but something about its presence made the entire Grand Fleet seem inadequate by comparison. Commander Dan Clark's voice came through on all Imperial communication frequencies simultaneously, despite the fact that the humans had not been given access to Imperial communication codes. His calm tone was exactly the same as it had been in his original message, and he showed no sign of being intimidated by the massive fleet surrounding his single ship. The human commander spoke as if he were addressing a group of children rather than the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Commander Clark expressed disappointment that the Empire had chosen warfare over peaceful negotiation and stated that humanity had hoped for a different outcome. He explained that his people valued life and preferred diplomatic solutions to conflicts, but that they would defend themselves if attacked. The human commander's words carried a sense of sadness rather than anger, as he prepared to demonstrate why the Empire should have accepted his original offer. Admiral Burke ordered her fleet to open fire on the single human vessel, and over 2,000 Imperial warships unleashed their weapons simultaneously. The combined firepower was equivalent to several supernovas, and should have been capable of destroying anything in space, but the human ship seemed unaffected by the massive barrage. The vessel moved through the energy beams and missile explosions. As if they were nothing more than a light breeze, the human ship began moving faster than Imperial sensors could track, and Beth Martinez watched in horror as her instruments showed the alien vessel appearing in multiple locations at the same time. The ship seemed to exist in several different positions simultaneously, while striking Imperial vessels with weapons that bypassed shields and armor as if they did not exist. Beth had studied physics for her entire career, but what she was seeing violated everything she thought she knew about the universe. Captain Hayes watched through his view screen as the massive dreadnought Eternal Glory simply imploded when the human ship passed nearby. The flagship that had been the pride of the Imperial Navy folded in on itself like paper being crushed by an invisible hand and disappeared into a point of light that quickly faded to nothing. Hayes realized that the humans were using weapons, based on principles that Imperial science did not understand. The alien vessel moved through the Imperial formation like a shark among minnows, destroying or disabling ships faster than the human eye could follow. Imperial captains tried desperately to target the enemy ship, but their weapons seemed to pass harmlessly through it as if it were a hologram. The human vessel appeared to be manipulating space itself to avoid damage while simultaneously attacking from impossible angles. Admiral Burke's tactical officers reported that they were losing ships at a rate of 30 per minute, but their own weapons were having no effect on the human vessel. The alien ship seemed to know exactly where Imperial vessels would be before they moved there and was always in position to strike at the most vulnerable points on each target. Burke realized that her people were fighting an enemy that possessed technology beyond their comprehension. Beth Martinez recorded energy readings that suggested the humans were manipulating fundamental forces of nature, including gravity, time, and space itself. The alien ship seemed to be bending reality around itself to achieve impossible results, and Beth wondered if her people were fighting beings that had mastered the basic laws of physics. Her instruments showed power levels that should have required a star to generate, but the human vessel was containing and controlling that energy with ease. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes, but in that time, the human ship had systematically destroyed or disabled over 1,500 Imperial vessels. The remaining ships in the Grand Fleet were fleeing in panic as their crews realized they were facing an enemy that could not be defeated through conventional warfare. Captain Hayes ordered his ship to retreat at maximum speed while he tried to understand what he had witnessed. Commander Clark's voice came through Imperial communication systems one final time as the surviving ships scattered in all directions. The human commander expressed regret at the loss of life that could have been avoided if the Empire had chosen negotiation over aggression. He stated that humanity bore no ill will toward the Zephyrian people, but that continued resistance would result in additional demonstrations of human capabilities. The human ship disappeared as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving behind only wreckage and traumatized survivors from what had been the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Admiral Burke found herself commanding fewer than 50 operational vessels out of the 2,000 ships that had assembled for the battle. The Grand Fleet that had taken 3 centuries to build had been reduced to insignificance in a matter of minutes. Engineer Martinez analyzed the wreckage of destroyed Imperial ships and discovered that the human weapons had somehow caused matter to reorganize itself at the molecular level. The alien technology had not simply destroyed Imperial vessels, but had fundamentally altered the basic structure of their materials in ways that should have been impossible. Beth realized that humanity possessed scientific knowledge that was centuries ahead of anything the Empire had achieved. Captain Hayes transmitted his battle report to Imperial Command, while his ship limped back toward Zephyrian space at reduced speed due to damage from the human demonstration. His report would reach Emperor Valex within hours, and would force the Imperial leadership to confront the reality that they had encountered a species far superior to their own in every aspect of technology and warfare. The survivors of the Grandi fleet carried with them the knowledge that the Zephyrian Empire was no longer the dominant power in their region of space. Humanity had demonstrated technological capabilities that made Imperial achievements look primitive by comparison, and had done so with a single ship that had never been in any real danger during the entire engagement. Admiral Burke knew that her military career was effectively over, and that the Empire itself might not survive the revelation that there were beings in the universe who could destroy them without effort. The surviving ships of the Grand Fleet limped back to Imperial space, carrying news that would forever change the Zephyrian Empire's understanding of its place in the galaxy. Captain Kevin Hayes transmitted his battle report from the bridge of the damaged destroyer Guardian, while emergency repair crews worked to keep his ship operational long enough to reach the nearest Imperial base. The report described events that seemed impossible, but had been witnessed by thousands of surviving crew members. Emperor Valex the Conqueror received Admiral Burke's preliminary battle report in his palace on Zephyr Prime, and read it 3 times, before accepting that the largest military force in Imperial history had been destroyed by a single alien vessel. The Emperor's rage at this humiliation was quickly replaced by fear as he realized that humanity possessed technology capable of destroying his entire empire without difficulty. Valex had built his reputation on military conquest, but now faced an enemy that made his greatest achievements meaningless. Within 6 hours of receiving the battle reports, Emperor Valex authorized Admiral Burke to contact Commander Clark and accept all human demands without negotiation. The Empire would withdraw from the Terran neutral zone, provide reparations to affected colonies, and agree to any other conditions humanity might impose. Valex knew that continued resistance would only result in the complete destruction of everything his ancestors had built over 3 centuries. Commander Clark's ship reappeared at Zephyr Prime 3 days later, but this time the human vessel came as a diplomatic mission rather than a military threat. The alien ship took position in orbit around the Imperial capital and requested permission to send representatives to meet with Imperial leadership. The fact that the humans were asking permission rather than simply taking what they wanted suggested they preferred cooperation to conquest. 3 humans transported down to the Imperial Palace using technology that bypassed all security systems and appeared directly in the main conference room where Emperor Valex and his advisors were waiting. Commander Clark was accompanied by 2 other humans who introduced themselves as Dr. Ellen Davis, a diplomatic specialist, and Colonel Frank Baker, a military advisor. The 3 humans wore simple uniforms and carried no visible weapons, but their presence filled the room with quiet authority. Dr. Davis explained that humanity had been aware of the Zephyrian Empire for several decades and had been studying imperial expansion patterns to determine whether the Empire posed a threat to human interests. The humans had developed their advanced technology specifically to counter aggressive civilizations like the Zephyrians, and had been preparing for eventual contact since they first detected Imperial ships in their region of space. Colonel Baker revealed that what the Empire had encountered was not humanity's main military force, but a single reconnaissance vessel equipped with experimental defensive systems. The human ship that had destroyed the Grand Fleet was designed for exploration and intelligence gathering rather than warfare, and represented only a small fraction of humanity's actual military capabilities. Baker's calm delivery of this information made it clear that resistance would be futile. The humans offered the Empire a choice between cooperation and isolation. Dr. Davis explained that humanity preferred to work with other species rather than dominate them, and was willing to share limited technology in exchange for peaceful coexistence and protection of smaller civilizations. The alternative Colonel Baker made clear was complete exclusion from human-protected space and the eventual stagnation of Zephyrian technology and expansion. Emperor Valix found himself negotiating with beings who possessed overwhelming technological superiority but seemed genuinely interested in peaceful solutions to interstellar conflicts. The humans demonstrated their good faith by providing medical technology that could cure diseases that had plagued the Empire for generations and energy sources that could power entire planets with minimal environmental impact. These gifts came with the understanding that cooperation would result in additional benefits. Dr. Davis established a Human Colonial Authority office on Zephyr Prime and began working with Imperial officials to restructure the Empire's government and military along more peaceful lines. The humans did not seek to destroy Zephyrian culture or traditions, but wanted to eliminate the aggressive expansion policies that had brought the Empire into conflict with smaller species. Davis made it clear that this restructuring was not optional. Colonel Baker worked with Admiral Burke and General Parker to transform the Imperial military from a conquest force into a peacekeeping organization under human supervision. The Zephyrian fleet would be reduced in size and refocused on protecting trade routes and defending against pirates rather than conquering new territories. Baker provided training programs that would help Imperial officers adapt to their new role as protectors rather than conquerors. The transition from Empire to Protectorate was completed within 6 months as human administrators worked alongside Zephyrian officials to implement new policies and procedures. Emperor Valix retained his title and continued to rule the 40-star systems, but now answered to the Human Colonial Authority on matters of interstellar policy and military deployment. The proud imperial military became a regional security force that operated under human guidance. Captain Hayes found himself assigned to one of the new peacekeeping units and discovered that working with human advisors was far different from his previous military experience. The humans emphasized protection of civilian populations and diplomatic solutions to conflicts rather than the overwhelming force tactics that had characterized imperial operations for centuries. Hayes initially resented the changes, but gradually came to appreciate the reduced casualty rates and improved relations with other species. Engineer Beth Martinez was selected to participate in human technology sharing programs and began studying scientific principles that were centuries ahead of imperial understanding. The humans were generous with their knowledge, but careful to share only technologies that would benefit the Zephyrian people without creating new military threats. Beth realized that her people had been primitive children playing with dangerous toys compared to humanity's mature understanding of the universe. Dr. Carl Jensen established a joint research facility where human and Zephyrian scientists worked together to develop new technologies for peaceful purposes. Carl discovered that humanity's scientific knowledge was based on a completely different understanding of physics that treated space-time and matter as malleable resources rather than fixed constraints. The humans were patient teachers who seemed genuinely interested in helping their former enemies achieve a better understanding of reality. Agent Lisa Stone found her intelligence services restructured to focus on protecting the Empire from external threats rather than gathering information for conquest operations. The humans provided intelligence networks that were far superior to anything the Empire had possessed, and made it clear that attempts to spy on human activities would not be tolerated. Lisa learned to appreciate the security that came from having such powerful protectors. The Zephyrian people initially resented their loss of independence, but gradually came to appreciate the benefits of human protection and technology. Diseases were eliminated, hunger became a thing of the past, and interstellar travel became safer and more efficient under human guidance. The quality of life for ordinary citizens improved dramatically, even as the Empire's military power was reduced to insignificance. Admiral Burke wrote in her personal log that humanity had accomplished something that seemed impossible by defeating the Empire without destroying it and transforming aggressive conquerors into peaceful partners. The humans had demonstrated that superior technology combined with wisdom and restraint could achieve better results than pure military force. Burke realized that her people had been fortunate to encounter beings who preferred cooperation to extermination. The Empire that had once dominated 40 star systems through military might found itself becoming part of a larger galactic community under human leadership. The Zephyrians discovered that there were other species who had undergone similar transformations, and that humanity was gradually building a peaceful alliance of worlds that focused on exploration and scientific advancement rather than conquest and domination. Emperor Valix concluded his final official address by acknowledging that the unknown ship that had appeared and vanished weeks earlier had brought his people the greatest gift possible by forcing them to abandon their destructive path and embrace a better way of existence under the guidance of beings far wiser than themselves.